Chosen one, something shifted in while you were sleeping. You may not have felt it when it happened, and if you woke up carrying the same concerns you carried yesterday, that makes sense. But there are moments when movement begins long before the evidence appears, and I believe this is one of those moments. What is being positioned for your life is bigger than another temporary solution, because what God prepares is never limited to survival. Before we go any further, I want you to notice something. There is a reason these words held your attention when so many other things passed by unnoticed. Something in you recognized this moment before your mind could explain it, and maybe what you've been carrying lately is something you rarely talk about anymore. Not because you're hiding it, but because you've grown tired of trying to explain a burden nobody else seems to understand. If you're here right now, listening with an open heart, then stay with me for a moment. Take a slow breath and let yourself settle. Feel the air fill your lungs, hold it gently, and then release it. As you do, say these words, God is not joking. Say it again, and this time, let it reach the places in you that have grown weary from waiting. Because maybe the deepest pain was never the lack itself. Maybe it was waking up day after day wondering when the pressure would finally ease. Maybe it was smiling through conversations while quietly carrying questions about your future, your finances, and whether the promises you held onto still had your name attached to them. I want you to hear this clearly. What God planted in your spirit was never empty language. What He spoke in private moments still carries life, and what carries life does not expire. And this is where it becomes personal. There are signs that often appear when a chosen one is standing closer to a breakthrough than they realize. The first sign is something many people dismiss, yet it stays with them long after they wait. You have had dreams that felt unusually real, dreams that carried a strange weight as though they left something behind inside you when morning came. Maybe you saw opportunities, resources, places, or possibilities that felt unfamiliar and yet somehow deeply connected to you. The images lingered, the feeling stayed. They followed you into the day because something about them felt different from ordinary imagination. What comes from God often leaves an imprint that refuses to disappear. The second sign is harder to talk about because it involves loss. You did what you were supposed to do. You worked, planned, sacrificed, stayed faithful, and still watched opportunities slip away. People offered explanations, but deep inside, something told you there was more to the story than bad timing or unfortunate circumstances. The truth is that some losses feel too intentional to be meaningless. There were seasons when things were removed before you understood why, and those moments left questions behind. Yet even now, part of you senses that what looked like an ending may have been making room for something you could not see at the time. The delay carried information. You just could not read it yet. The third sign appears quietly. People begin responding to you differently around provision, generosity, and opportunity. Small moments start showing up where doors seem slightly easier to open. Conversations feel unusually timely, or help arrives from places you never expected. These moments may look ordinary on the surface, yet something about them feels like the first ripple before a much larger wave. The fourth sign often feels more frustrating than spiritual. It is the restlessness that refuses to leave you alone. You keep trying to accept things as they are, but something deep inside continues whispering that there is more ahead than what you can currently see. You are not greedy. You are not ungrateful. You are simply reaching the point where your spirit can no longer make itself comfortable inside a life that is too small for who you are becoming. That voice keeps returning because the version of you that survives this season will not fit inside your old expectations. The fifth sign may be the simplest of all. You are still here. You are still listening, not because you were looking for entertainment and not because you were bored. Something in these words touched a place that has been waiting for confirmation for a very long time. There is a part of you that wants to receive this fully, and another part that is preparing to protect itself from disappointment. That tension is real. Yet even with that hesitation, you stayed, and perhaps that says more than you realize. So say this with me now. The blessing moves now. Not because everything suddenly makes sense, not because everything question has been answered. The blessing moves because God is faithful to what He has spoken, even during the seasons when you struggle to see it. His promise over your life has always been larger than the limits of your current circumstances. What feels impossible from where you stand today may already be moving into place beyond your line of sight. And chosen one, what seems late from the ground often looks perfectly timed from heaven. Chosen one, I want to speak directly to the part of you that has been carrying this quietly. The part that still believes in God, still believes in His promises, and still prays even after prayers seem to echo back unanswered. Your faith is not shallow faith. It is the kind that survived seasons that should have emptied you. Seasons that left you holding on with nothing visible in your hands. And yet, despite all of that, the numbers have not changed. The pressure still visits your mind, and some nights the weight feels just as real as it did before. There is a thought that has crossed your heart more than once, and perhaps you never said it out loud. Maybe God's promises are true, but maybe they were meant for someone else. Maybe abundance is real, but somehow it keeps passing you by. Maybe there was a moment you were supposed to step into, and somehow you missed it. That voice feels convincing because it speaks through exhaustion, not rebellion. It grows louder after long seasons of waiting, when disappointment becomes familiar and hope starts protecting itself from being hurt again. But what if the issue was never that God forgot you? What if what you are experiencing is something different entirely? After years of surviving difficult seasons, many people become so accustomed to carrying burdens that struggle begins to feel normal. They learn how to anticipate problems, prepare for loss, and expect disappointment before it arrives. And when that happens, even good things can feel unfamiliar. Think about your own life for a moment. How many opportunities did you quietly dismiss because they seemed too good to be true? How many times did someone offer help and you immediately felt uncomfortable receiving it? How many doors opened slightly, only for you to step back because disappointment had taught you to be careful? The heart can become so familiar with protecting itself that it struggles to recognize when something good is finally arriving. And this is where the story begins to change. You are no longer the same person who entered those painful seasons years ago. You have walked through betrayal. You have carried responsibilities nobody saw. You have remained faithful through moments when giving up would have been easier than believing. The version of you sitting here now carries a wisdom that could only be earned through endurance. Maybe that is why something inside you refuses to settle. Maybe that is why there is still a quiet expectation alive beneath the fatigue. Not because life has been easy, but because your spirit recognizes that this chapter cannot be the final chapter. There is a difference between being delayed and being abandoned. What felt like delay may have been preparation happening in places you could not yet see. Take a breath and let that settle for a moment. You have spent enough time comparing your journey to someone else's timeline. You have spent enough energy wondering why things seem to happen for others while your own prayers remain suspended in silence. The answers may not have arrived all at once, but that does not mean nothing has been moving. Sometimes the deepest work happens where human eyes cannot follow it. I want to take you to a story that may feel closer to your own life than you realize. Nehemiah had a role that provided stability, but deep inside him lived a vision that refused to leave him alone. The people around him could not fully understand it. Some thought it was unrealistic, others could not see what he saw. Yet the vision remained because it did not originate from human approval. He looked at ruins and saw restoration. He looked at limitations and still felt called forward. What made his story remarkable was not that he had everything he needed from the beginning. It was that provision was already moving before he could see it. Long before he spoke, long before doors opened, things were being arranged beyond his awareness. There is a word often associated with that kind of moment, Shifa. It speaks of overflow, of provision that reaches beyond bare survival and into fullness. It carries the image of something long prepared, finally finding its way into the life it was intended for. Not forced, not chased, simply arriving in its appointed season. Chosen one, there may be walls in front of you right now that feel impossible to rebuild. There may be areas of your life that look unfinished, delayed or forgotten. Yet what if the story is not ending at the ruins? What if you are standing closer to restoration than you realize? What if the very places that convinced you God was silent eventually become the places that reveal how present He was all along? So let these words settle deeply within you. Say them slowly. I receive this. Not because you understand every detail, not because every question has been answered. Simply because there comes a moment when receiving becomes an act of trust. Receiving is not about having all the explanations. It is about opening your hands after carrying so much for so long. It is about allowing yourself to believe that God's goodness can reach you too. And sometimes, chosen one, surrender is simply the courage to stop fighting the possibility that something beautiful may finally be on its way. Chosen one, there is something I want to show you that many people spend years overlooking. Before we talk about it, pause for a moment and notice how you feel right now compared to when you first started listening. Maybe your breathing feels a little slower. Maybe the pressure in your chest is not sitting quite as heavily as it was before. Maybe for the first time today, the constant noise in your mind has softened enough for you to hear your own thoughts again. That shift matters more than you realize. Sometimes transformation begins so quietly that we almost miss it. It does not arrive with fireworks or dramatic announcements. It begins as a small opening, a little more clarity, a little more space, a moment where something inside you whispers that perhaps things are not as hopeless as they once seemed. There is another pattern I want to talk about because it has affected more chosen ones than most people realize. It is what happens after years of carrying burdens, surviving disappointments, and learning to expect less than what your heart once hoped for. After enough setbacks, a person can begin looking at life through a kind of haze, and eventually that haze becomes so familiar they stop noticing it is there. You may have experienced this without realizing it. Have you ever looked back and seen an opportunity you completely overlooked at the time? Have you ever remembered a conversation, an idea, or an open door, and wondered why you did not recognize its value when it was right in front of you? That is what disappointment often does. It teaches you to focus so intensely on avoiding pain that you stop recognizing possibility. The difficult part is that this haze rarely sounds negative. In fact, it often sounds reasonable. It presents itself as caution, wisdom, practicality, or patience. It gives you convincing explanations for why now is not the right time, why that opportunity probably will not work, why you should wait a little longer before believing something good could happen. And because those explanations sound intelligent, many chosen ones trust them. They slowly talk themselves out of things they once prayed for. They dismiss ideas that stirred something in their spirit. They convince themselves that what felt significant was probably nothing. Over time, possibility becomes background noise, and survival becomes the loudest voice in the room. But there is a difference between discernment and fear wearing the mask of wisdom. There is a difference between being guided and being guarded. Sometimes what looks like caution is actually the residue of old disappointment trying to protect you from future pain. I want you to hear this carefully. The struggle was real. The losses were real. The waiting was real. But none of those things changed how God sees you. What changed was the way you learned to see yourself. After enough difficult seasons, the chosen one can begin to look in the mirror and see only limitations, only mistakes, only evidence of what has not happened yet. Yet God sees something entirely different. He sees the person you are becoming. He sees the strength formed through endurance. He sees the wisdom created through hardship. He sees possibilities that your weary mind sometimes struggles to imagine. What you call delay, He often calls preparation, and maybe that is why these words are finding you right now. Not because you need more information, but because you need a clearer view, because somewhere beneath the exhaustion, beneath the disappointment, beneath all the reasons you stopped expecting more, there is still a part of you that remembers. This is not information. It is remembrance. Now I want to give you something simple to practice today. Not because you need to force anything to happen, but because you deserve a moment of stillness. Before you go to sleep tonight, close your eyes and gently notice your body. Pay attention to your forehead, your jaw, your shoulders, your chest. Notice where you have been carrying tension without realizing it. Do not judge what you find. Do not try to fix anything. Simply notice it. Many chosen ones have spent so much time carrying responsibilities that they no longer realize how tightly they are holding themselves together. Awareness itself can become the beginning of release. Then tomorrow morning, before the noise of the day reaches you, sit quietly for a few minutes. Before checking your phone, before opening messages, before stepping into everyone else's needs. Allow yourself a moment of stillness. As you sit there, repeat these words slowly and sincerely. I am open to receive what God has already prepared for me. Let each repetition settle a little deeper than the last. Do not rush through it. Let it become a reminder that your life is not built solely around problems to solve or threats to avoid. Let it remind you that provision, guidance, opportunities, and unexpected grace can still find their way to you. Because, chosen one, sometimes the greatest shift is not that something new arrives. Sometimes the greatest shift is finally seeing what has been waiting for you all along. Step 2 is simple, but it matters more than you may realize. During the moment when financial stress feels the heaviest, when your thoughts begin racing ahead of you and your chest feels tight with uncertainty, pause for a moment. Place your hands over your heart and say, the fog is not reality. The fog is a filter. I choose to see what God sees. Sometimes that single pause creates enough space for truth to enter where fear has been speaking the loudest. The reason this matters is because a discouraged heart can begin treating temporary conditions as permanent ones. After enough waiting, after enough disappointment, it becomes easy to assume that what you see today is all there will ever be. Yet many of the doors meant for you were never hidden. They simply became difficult to recognize through the weight of exhaustion. Sometimes all it takes is a small moment of clarity to notice what has been standing in front of you all along. Then before you go to sleep, spend a few quiet minutes looking back over your day. Instead of replaying everything that went wrong, pay attention to the moments you may have overlooked. Maybe it was a conversation that stayed with you. Maybe it was an unexpected idea that appeared while your mind was elsewhere. Maybe it was a feeling, a reminder, a kindness, or a moment of peace that arrived without warning. The chosen one often expects God to move through dramatic moments, yet some of the most important shifts arrive quietly. The more you learn to notice them, the more clearly you begin to recognize patterns of provision, guidance, and timing that were already unfolding around you. What once felt random begins to feel meaningful. What once felt ordinary begins to reveal a deeper purpose. And with each day you practice this, something begins to change. The confusion loses its grip. The constant mental noise becomes less convincing. You start seeing connections you missed before. You start remembering dreams you nearly abandoned. You start noticing possibilities that had become invisible after years of carrying too much responsibility. One morning you may wake up and realize the shift did not happen overnight. It happened gradually, through hundreds of small moments of awareness. What seemed absent was often present. What seemed delayed was often developing. What seemed forgotten was often being prepared beyond your line of sight. So say these words with me now. The fog lifts now. Let them settle deeply within you. Not because every problem has disappeared, but because clarity begins the moment you stop giving confusion the final word. Every insight you have felt while listening, every moment when something inside you quietly said, "That is exactly how I feel," is evidence that something is already changing. There is often a gap between knowing something is true and fully living as though it is true. Most people have experienced that gap. They believe God is faithful, yet they still carry fear. They believe there is more ahead, yet they continue preparing themselves for disappointment. The gap is real, and many chosen ones have lived there longer than they intended. But being a chosen one has never been about perfection. It has never been about having flawless faith or complete certainty. It is about accepting who you are becoming even before you fully understand the journey. It is about allowing your heart to align with what your spirit has sensed all along. The blessing attached to your life does not require you to earn it through endless striving. It requires a willingness to see differently. It requires the courage to release old conclusions. It requires trusting that God's view of your future is larger than your current circumstances, and perhaps that process has already begun. Maybe that is why you are still here. Maybe that is why these words feel familiar, because somewhere beneath the years of waiting, beneath the disappointment, beneath every reason you gave yourself to stop expecting more, there is still a part of you that remembers, a part of you that has never completely let go. A part of you that still believes there is more to this story. Chosen one, before we go any further, I want you to notice something. Over the course of this message, there may have been moments when a thought landed differently than expected. A sentence stayed with you. A memory resurfaced. A feeling you had pushed aside suddenly came back into focus. Those moments matter because they often reveal what your spirit has been trying to show you for a very long time. Sometimes the greatest obstacle is not a closed door. Sometimes it is the belief that every door will eventually close because too many already have. After enough disappointment, people learn how to protect themselves. They lower expectations. They stop talking about certain dreams. They convince themselves they are being realistic, when in truth they are simply tired of being hurt. And maybe that speaks to something you've been carrying. Maybe you've heard promises before. Maybe you've believed before. Maybe you've invested your hope into things that never became what you thought they would become. After a while, a wall forms inside you, built from unanswered questions and unmet expectations. That wall is understandable. It served a purpose when you needed protection. But I want to ask you something gently. What if the wall that once protected you is now blocking your view? What if the reason you struggle to recognize what is changing is not because nothing is changing, but because disappointment trained you to expect less than what your heart still quietly hopes for? The chosen one often lives in this tension. One part of them remembers the promise. Another part remembers the pain. One part wants to believe again. Another part is preparing for the familiar outcome. And somewhere between those two voices, they learn to survive instead of expecting. Yet survival was never meant to become your permanent identity. You have come too far to remain the person who entered this season. You have endured things that changed you. You have carried burdens that strengthened you. You have survived moments that revealed depths of faith you never knew existed. Even when you felt abandoned, something inside you kept moving forward. That matters, because transformation rarely arrives as a single dramatic event. More often, it begins as a quiet shift in perspective, a realization, a new level of clarity, a willingness to see your story differently than you did before. What once looked like endless delay begins to reveal hidden preparation. What once looked like rejection begins to reveal redirection. And that is why I believe you are still listening. Not because you are searching for entertainment, not because you are waiting for someone to tell you what you want to hear. You are here because something in you recognizes that there is still more to this story. There is still a chapter that has not been written. There is still a part of your life that refuses to believe the struggle gets the final word. Take a slow breath and let that settle. The timing of your life is not measured only by what you can currently see. There are things being arranged beyond your awareness. There are lessons that have already shaped you. There are doors that may be closer than they appear. And while you may not have all the answers today, you do not need all the answers to take the next step. The story of Nehemiah reminds us of that. The opportunity was present before it became visible. The provision was moving before it was recognized. What looked impossible eventually became the very thing that opened the way forward. And perhaps that is where you are standing now. Chosen one, not at the end of the journey, at the edge of a new understanding, at the moment where faith begins to feel less like striving and more like trust, at the place where you stop asking whether God has forgotten you and begin noticing the ways He has been preparing you all along. Chosen one, if this is your moment, you will recognize it. Not because someone persuaded you, but because something deep within you has been quietly responding this entire time. There are moments when truth arrives and feels strangely familiar, as if your spirit has known it long before your mind found words for it. This feels like one of those moments. Close your eyes for a moment and come with me. I want you to picture something so clearly that you can almost feel it before you fully believe it. Imagine it is 6 months from now. The first thing you notice is not a number in a bank account or a dramatic change in circumstance. The first thing you notice is peace. You wake up naturally on an ordinary morning. The room is quiet. There is no rush of anxiety waiting for you before your feet touch the floor. There is no familiar weight sitting on your chest demanding your attention before the day even begins. For the first time in a long time, your body feels rested because your mind finally learned how to rest too. You reach for your phone, but not with the tension you once carried. The fear is gone. The constant need to brace yourself for bad news has loosened its grip. And as you move through that morning, what overwhelms you is not excitement. It is gratitude. A quiet, overwhelming gratitude for how much has changed inside you. You walk into the kitchen with a cup of coffee in your hands, and suddenly you remember who you used to be. You remember the nights you questioned everything, the moments you almost stopped believing, the prayers you whispered when nobody else was around. And as those memories return, you realize something important. The blessing was never only about money. It was about freedom. It was about freedom. It was about finally breathing without fear sitting beside you. It was about waking up without carrying yesterday's worries into today's possibilities. It was about discovering that God had been faithful through every season, even the ones that looked empty while you were living through them. You begin to see your story differently. The delays no longer feel meaningless. The waiting no longer feels wasted. The seasons that once looked like rejection begin to reveal themselves as preparation. Piece by piece, things that never made sense before start fitting together in a way they never could, while you were standing in the middle of them. Now take a slow breath. Let it fill your lungs completely. Feel the space inside you expand. There is more room within you than you thought. More hope, more resilience, more capacity to receive goodness than years of disappointment allowed you to believe. As you exhale, imagine releasing every burden you were never meant to carry forever. The pressure to have everything figured out. The exhaustion of comparing your life to someone else's timeline. The belief that because something has been delayed, it has been denied. That those things leave your hands one by one. Picture an old lock resting over your heart, a lock formed through years of disappointment, survival, and silent battles nobody else knew you were fighting. Now imagine that lock beginning to loosen, not because something outside of you finally changed, but because you are beginning to see yourself through God's eyes instead of through your wounds. Notice how different everything looks when fear is no longer leading the conversation. The fog that once surrounded your future begins to thin. What seemed impossible becomes imaginable. What seemed hidden becomes visible. Doors, opportunities, connections, and possibilities begin appearing where you once saw only obstacles. The remarkable thing is that many of them were there all along. You simply could not see them through the weight of everything you had been carrying. Now place your hand over your heart and feel its steady rhythm. Every beat is a reminder that you are still here. Every breath is proof that your story is still unfolding. Every moment you have survived carries evidence that God has never abandoned you. even when his work was invisible to you. Let yourself receive that truth, not as information, as remembrance, because everything before this moment has been shaping you, every difficult season, every unanswered question, every delay, every moment when faith felt harder than fear. None of it was wasted. And now, chosen one, release what no longer belongs to you. Release the belief that abundance is reserved for other people. Release the shame attached to old mistakes. Release the exhaustion of carrying every burden alone. Release the fear that your best days already passed. Release the identity that was built around surviving. You no longer need it. Let it go. And from the deepest place within you, say these words slowly. I am the chosen one who receives with open hands. I am the one who remained standing when life asked me to quit. I am the one who carried faith through seasons that made no sense. I am the one who survived, learned, grew, and continued forward when giving up seemed easier. I am living proof that God's promises remain alive even through long seasons of waiting. I am becoming everything He has been shaping me to become. I am stepping into greater peace, greater clarity, greater trust, and greater freedom. I receive what God has prepared for me, and I welcome it with an open heart. It is already unfolding. It has been unfolding longer than I realized. And today, I choose to see it. And now, chosen one, take one more slow breath and let everything settle. Let these words move beyond your thoughts and sink into the deeper places within you. There are moments when something shifts quietly inside a person, and they cannot fully explain it yet. They simply know they are not seeing themselves, their future, or their story the same way they were before. Maybe nothing around you looks different yet. Maybe the room is exactly the same. Maybe the circumstances waiting for you after this message are still there. But something inside you has begun to move, and that matters more than you realize. Because every lasting transformation begins within before it becomes visible without. If something in this message touched your heart, I want to ask you to do something simple. Press the like button, not as a favor to me, but as a way of helping another chosen one find these words when they need them most. Somewhere, someone is carrying the same questions you carried. Someone is sitting alone wondering if their prayers still matter, wondering if God still sees them, wondering if the waiting has a purpose. And if a face came to your mind while you were listening, pay attention to that. You already know who they are. Maybe they have grown tired. Maybe they have stopped talking about what they are carrying because they are exhausted from trying to explain it. Send this message to them and trust that what is meant to reach them will reach them, the same way you found these words when you needed them. Someone else may be waiting for the encouragement that you now have the opportunity to pass forward. Sometimes a simple act of sharing becomes part of a much larger story than we realize. Sometimes hope travels from one heart to another through the smallest acts of obedience, and if this is your first time hearing a message like this, and something inside you is quietly saying, there is more, listen to that voice. The chosen one often recognizes truth before they fully understand it. Stay connected, stay open, and continue walking this path of awakening, growth, and deeper trust. You are not alone in this journey. There are others who have endured long seasons of waiting, others who have wrestled with doubt while still holding on to faith. Others who are learning just as you are, but settling for less than what God placed in their heart is no longer an option. Now allow me to leave you with this blessing. May the God who sustained you through every difficult season continue to guide your steps. May the doors meant for your life open at the right time. May wisdom meet you when decisions need to be made. May provision meet you where you once expected lack. May peace replace anxiety, and may trust grow stronger than fear. May every delay reveal its purpose. May every wound become a source of wisdom. May every lesson from your journey strengthen the person you are becoming. And may the testimony that emerges from your life remind others that God remains faithful even in seasons when His work is hidden from view. Chosen one, Walk forward with confidence. Walk forward with peace. Walk forward knowing that your story is still unfolding. The waiting has shaped you. The struggle has strengthened you. The preparation has not been wasted. And if there is one thing I hope you carry with you after today, let it be this: God has not forgotten you. He never did. The path ahead may still require faith, but you no longer walk it wondering whether He is with you. You walk it knowing. So, lift your head, chosen one. Open your hands. Take the next step in front of you, not someday, not when everything is perfect, today, with this breath. And with this quiet knowing in your heart that what God begins, He is faithful to complete.